Warm weather in the east continues, but a cold front looms from the west that's going to usher in a big change this weekend. Plus, we have stuff going on off the east coast that includes a rather elongated tropical storm Philippe. We're going to talk about all of that and how it fits into the equation. Northern New England, rather eastern New England, and actually parts of northern New England and upstate New York could be in line for some heavy rain with what's going to be happening with this cold front and a developing system that's probably going to be non-tropical. A lot going on. So we will talk about it in such incredible detail that your hair will stand on end. That's tonight on the Joe and Joe Weather Show, which is brought to you by
Omni True Value.
Hardware.
Hardware. I'm sorry.
At
I
12,
jumped and gave the website, but nonetheless.
At 1226 North Wellwood Avenue in West Babylon, New York. Mulch, topsoil, sand, and, of course, making sure your home looks good. Everything is working properly just in case it gets a little stormy around here, which it may not be that bad, but we'll see. 631-756-1125 for the best prices in town. And, of course, the website is...
Now I could say it. OmniTrueValue.com.
Tempest by Weatherflow. Just get the revolutionary Tempest weather system, folks, and then you, too, can join the fastest-growing observing weather network on the planet. The link is pinned to the top of the chat board. It's also on the descriptor to this video. And if you decide to make a purchase of this or anything else on the Tempest by Weatherflow website, use the coupon code I want a weather station. I want a weather station. And if you do, you will get
10 big % off.
And that's not a bad thing.
No, it's not.
Yes.
Now you are going to be a Domkopf.
Yes, you are. So, yeah, it was a very interesting day for me, Joe. You already know the story, but the folks on the chat board don't know. So, one of the things that grows prolifically around here is vines. All sorts of vines. I don't know how many different species of vines, okay?
So you're talking... You're preaching to the choir, Joe.
Well, Joe, these are the kind of vines.
These are kudzu?
No, I don't have. Actually, was able to get rid of the kudzu last year. My neighbor took it all down, and none of it came back, which was good. No, these are just like standard vines. English ivy vines, and poison ivy vines, and all sorts of other ivy vines, and they grow so. I'm not kidding you. They grow so fast that you'll walk out one day and they're all attached to the side of your house. They go up about 6. They're trying to climb all the way up to above the roof. So you yank them down, and I'm telling you, the next day they're all back. Okay, they're all back. If you stood against that wall long enough, they would wrap themselves around you and kill you. I mean, that's just how crazy it is. So now that it's fall and they're starting to die off, I decided to go ahead and rip them off the side of my house, which I did, and then I took the clippers and I cut them at the roots. Well, my broadband line was woven in all of that, so of course I wound up cutting it. Thankfully, Blue Ridge Mountain Electric Broadband, they're a great bunch of people. They sent out a crew within a couple of hours, and it was literally a 60-second fix to just put in a new wire. But it was just one of those. I purposely, Joe, as I started, I said, okay, I got to be careful because I can't cut this line. Okay, I knew what I was doing. I cannot cut this line, and somehow I cut the line. So, but anyway, it's back. Everything is working. The internet's been okay. I noticed earlier tonight it was kind of jumping around, but it seems to be okay. But
we have kind of like vines outside thankfully outside our house, and we had to clear them away because we had the guys come and redo the driveway yesterday. And these particular vines, Joe, they have these teeny tiny little round things that attach themselves to your shirt, your socks, your pants. I don't know what the hell you call them, but it was disgusting.
Yeah, these here when they climb up, you can see they have like these little extensions on their roots. They grab onto whatever it is, the wood or whatever object they grab onto it, and they they get a fairly tight grip on those things. When you pull it down, you actually hear the connections ripping off. That is nature's wonder because they're all trying to climb up to get to where the sun is. And anyway, I did manage to get them all out. I pulled the roots out of the ground. And these roots, by the way, go for miles. So even me pulling out the roots and cutting them, they're guaranteed to just to grow back. So it's just a matter of trying to stay ahead of them. Anyway, I
Just-
didn't I
I
didn't
noticed, I noticed on the chat board now, we have had, in recent weeks, we have had Bobby Rayo. We've had Rayo Coin, right?
Mhm,
We've had Rayo Stamp.
mhm.
And now tonight, we apparently have, maybe it's the same clown that's been doing this all these weeks or whatever. Now we just simply have Rayo, and and I see next to that is, and it's a small micro-sized dot, but it looks like my picture. So I don't know what the heck's going on here. I don't know if you noticed that, Joe, but
No, yeah, I don't see him on the
I
board.
think I think he just took himself off the chat board.
Oh, all right.
Oh,
Well,
no, he didn't. He didn't. It's Rayo, and looks like something like an orange.
oh, now I have. Oh, was it Rayo? Latex Dream says Rayo Sunlight. All right, well, whatever.
Whatever.
Mrs. Rayo informs us that you have grapevines, Virginia creeper, and others. Okay,
Oh
never,
God.
never knew that. Okay, the chairman Scott Briller, the first hit the super chat tip jar tonight. Thank you, Scott. And he says Vermont, Joe, Burlington, Vermont, set an all-time October record high today at 86.
Wow.
And how warm were you today?
That's a good question. I'm sure the executive producer now will
Yell it
post,
down.
or she'll use the intercom. I could hear her now running to the weather station to check out today's high temperature. Yesterday we got to 82. I'm not sure.
Wow, 85.
Did you hear that?
What did she say?
85.
85. Yes.
85 degrees.
Well,
Wow.
I think tomorrow and Friday will probably be at least a few degrees lower with the more persistent wind coming in off the ocean, and that's not just at the shore, but probably working its way inland. And then I think there might be a few more clouds around tomorrow as that cold front gets closer.
Yeah, I on my Facebook page, and this was, as you can see, I'm back in the home office here. Still not quite. I'd say it's about 50 to 60% done, but we still have a lot of. I have a lot of things to sift through tomorrow, so I'm going to be busy tomorrow trying to get everything back into shape. But on my Facebook forecast for the Hudson Valley, I said 72 for coastal areas tomorrow because of a southeast wind,
Mhm.
but inland, like where I am, I'm pretty well inland, away from a coastal influence. 78, and let's not forget the fog. The last couple of mornings, Joe, there has been some really thick fog that has just covered parts of the triangle. Not everybody, but patchy areas of fog, near zero visibility. In fact, on one of the local stations, I think it was ABC 7, they actually had a kind of a time lapse of the George Washington Bridge. It could have very well have been the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco. You saw suggestions of the George Washington Bridge, the towers enveloped in this time lapse in thick fog that was around at sunrise this morning, and it could very well happen again tomorrow morning. But this is typical at this time of the year when you have especially warm spells of weather like this in the month of October. You get these patchy, dense, thick areas, cloaks of fog, and we may very well see that reform here later tonight as the air cools, and we'll go have one more go at it tomorrow. I don't think I'm with you, Joe. I don't think we're going to get quite as warm tomorrow, near 80 for some inland spots, and then things really go down on Friday with lots of clouds, and I think the ongoing risk of not heavy rain, but spotty shower activity on Friday. The heavier or more showery rains will probably wait until Friday night late into the start of the weekend on Saturday.
Yeah. It helps to have a stable air mass like we have in the east right now in order to really pull off that patchy, dense fog during the nighttime and morning hours. You're not going to have that problem once the cold front goes by and we get into uh, that cooler air. Well, I'm calling it. I'm debating whether to call it much cooler or actually call it colder because we are going to go to below normal temperatures with this, and we're going to see that stick around for I think quite a while.
Yeah, I think we're going to be in a below normal temperature pattern. So I hope all of you out there have been enjoying this spell of remarkably warm temperatures because the one thing I've noticed, Joe, not a few weathercasters here locally are saying this is probably going to be the warmest temperatures we're going to see until next spring. I don't know. Sometimes, weird things happen. Sometimes
It's hard. You know what, Joe? You're trying to when you say something like that. The problem with that is you're talking about another 5 or 6 weeks where who knows that you can get into a ridge position like this for whatever reason. Even though the primary pattern might say otherwise, but you can get into a ridge position like this, and you wind up warming up, and then it's. I don't think you gain anything by making an unequivocal statement like that. When folks make unequivocal statements like that, because I think you have probably a 95% or higher probability of wind up being wrong. I get occasionally I get occasionally references to start talking about is this the last 80-degree weather for now, but 4 weeks from now this is going to happen, and maybe we'll have that, and are we going to see this 7 weeks from now? So how do I know? How does anybody know? I mean, look, CPC, folks. If you remember last week, Joe, you put up the map for CPC that showed above normal temperatures for the period coming up, which is like from October 8th or 9th to about the 13th or 14th.
Right.
They had the whole eastern 2/3 of the United States is above normal. Not happening. Not happening. Complete flip.
There you go.
Complete flip. And I'll tell you something else. What really?
Day forecasts, folks.
I really think what drove that was the fact that the models were with Philippe and with Nigel and what was the O storm?
Ophelia.
Ophelia. Well, not so much Ophelia, but with Philippe and with Nigel in particular and Rena to some extent, where the models were basically taking these storms all the way up into the North Atlantic and creating whatever pattern rearranging that they created. Well, none of that happened. So that allowed, I guess with those tropical systems that were forecast by the models to remain very strong and move up into the North Atlantic, it was going to create, some sort of ridging in the eastern part of the United States that was going to hang around for a while. Well, guess what? None of those storms wound up making it that far north. So, we've got the ridge this week, which was really, pretty well advertised. There's no big surprise about that. But now we're going to go into some big changes here. We're actually going to have a vortex in eastern Canada that's going to sit there for about 5 or 6 days. I can't remember the last time, winter, spring, or fall, where we've seen a Canadian vortex set up in eastern Canada. It's been a long time since we've seen that happen. Even the past winter, you hardly saw it happen. I might have to go back 2 or 3 years to see that.
Yeah, and of recent years, we've had mild falls. If we really have not had truly fall-like conditions or fall-like weather. Well, we're going to get, at least in the temperature department, fall-like weather. And sometimes you get fall-like weather and you get these lovely, crisp, dry conditions. But looking long range, and I'm sure we will in a little bit, Joe, doesn't exactly look all that dry in the coming days ahead.
No. Welcome to everybody on the chat board tonight, all the regulars, a few new folks, welcome. And Sandy Blue Ocean, who hasn't been feeling well. posting on the chat board that she's got COVID, but she seems to be feeling a little bit better today now that she's on the antiviral. So we're happy to hear that, Sandy Blue Ocean. So speedy recovery ahead. Subscribe to my YouTube channel, those of you who are new or lurking in the background. And you can watch the Joe and Joe Weather Show, which is on Sunday through Thursday at 7:35. Fridays and Saturdays we're usually off, but if there's a big storm around, like with Ophelia or whatever else we were on for Lee, we do rearrange our schedule. So we're not going to rearrange our schedule for this weekend. We're going to have Friday and Saturday off. So on that, and turn your notifications on, okay? And hit the subscribe button. And if you like the show tonight, be sure to hit the like button because Joe and I love to get over 100 likes. So let's move along here and go on to the this surface map for tonight. Except for the fact that the front is about a couple of 100 miles further to the east than it was yesterday, is pretty much the same in the eastern part of the United States, except that the high is now shifted offshore, and that's going to create that more of a southeast flow tomorrow, particularly on Friday, ahead of that cold front as it approaches. And still very quiet and dry throughout much of the eastern United States. And on the warm side, not crazy warm, but still on the warm side. It's actually warmer the further north you go than south.
And again, this is a typical type of thing that you see in October, is this dome of high pressure. Usually, climatologically speaking, that high pressure system is centered over West Virginia. And it's from this that we get the large number of clear days that we see during October, or in many spots in the mid-Atlantic and Northeast. This is the clearest time of the year. And as you mentioned, Joe, sometimes when the ridge parts itself like the way it does at night, you get radiation effect. Any little moisture that's left over condenses down into a thick layer of early morning fog, which burns off very quickly once the sun comes over the horizon. And it's a notice, if you will, folks. The sun is coming up now a lot later than it did about a month or two ago. It's now, for many folks, it's the sunrise comes after 7 o'clock in the morning. And thanks to the wonderful people in Washington, D.C., who made this spectacular brainiac decision of lengthening daylight saving time into early November. Some of you, when you get to the end of October or the beginning of November, will be seeing the sun coming up later than it ever does during the winter seasons. And so the days continue to get shorter, and those mornings continue to get darker. What else can I tell you?
You're talking about after 7 o'clock. My sunrise. Well, in Atlanta, now it's probably a couple of minutes close. It's probably close to this for me. 7:35, Joe.
Yeah.
7:35 is.
I could never understand who, Atlanta really should be a central time zone state. In which case,
they got to draw the line. They have to draw the line somewhere.
Yeah, but in the vicinity of a big city like Atlanta, whatever. Well, who am I to say? I'm not the one who is drawing the line.
Well, you have to go about 60 or 70 miles to the west to the Alabama border, because that's where you switch over to Central Time. Sunset today here was 7:18. Okay, but
Lovely.
and I'm in the mountains, so if the sun rises at 7:35, I mean, it's barely, the sun doesn't get over the mountains to shine until about maybe 9 a.m. So it's still relatively dark till about 8 o'clock.
Yeah.
Which means that when I have to take the dog out, I have to be a little extra careful in case, Yogi Bear is out there on the bird feeders.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, to the southeast on the lower right, you can see the Elon. I mean, this is really, this thing is barely a tropical storm, if it's even a tropical storm. We've got Philippe, which is stretched out north-south. There's so much shear going on. You can kind of see on those first few frames where you see the visible satellite still there. You see where the low-level circulation is. It's sort of right on the edge of one of these of the northernmost cluster of convection, and it just. It's just disjointed. But there's a lot of tropical moisture there. And to the northwest, If you look off the North Carolina coast, there's an upper low that is sitting there. So you have the models actually trying to generate, at least the GFS certainly trying to generate a non-tropical system in the next couple of days that's going to absorb the Philippe and its moisture and become a fairly powerful post-tropical storm as it moves up toward eastern New England. This could be this is going to be another big rainmaker for where they don't need it, Joe. Upstate New York, northern New York, and Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine could wind up getting a lot of rain from this, particularly if you wind up taking whether it's tropical, it doesn't make a difference. You're going to have a strong non-tropical low that's going to be a big problem here with regards to rain over the weekend in that area.
I agree with you. That's the one thing they really don't need. And of course, don't forget that this weekend is the big leaf peeping weekend. In other words, many people wait for Columbus Day weekend to head on up into New England to see the beautiful fall colors. The last thing that you need in this type of scenario, the last thing, well, maybe next to last, because there have been a few times over the last 50 years where there's actually been snow during this weekend in parts of New England. But the last thing you want is to have to deal with heavy rain, especially on a Saturday, which would bring down a lot of those colorful leaves, make everything wet. And you're right, Joe, especially Vermont has had more than its fair share of rain so far this year, especially from July on right up until the current time.
The cold front that's approaching is producing clouds from the Great Lakes southward through the Mississippi Valley and back into Texas, in north central Texas in particular. And that's where we have some severe weather going on this evening. And if we look at the radar, nothing in the east. I mean, there's just a couple of scattered showers, light showers in parts of South Florida and offshore. Otherwise, the radar is absolutely quiet until you get back to western Indiana, southern Illinois. And then you've got this cluster of heavy showers and thunderstorms and severe thunderstorms and flash flood warnings up in this area from central and central Texas northeastward into the eastern half of Oklahoma. So the Storm Prediction Center is obviously busy with this. And up in the northern plains, we've got showers that are moving across the Dakotas and back up into parts of Montana. The West Coast is quiet up and down from Washington State all the way down to California. Not a blip in that region. The Storm Prediction Center, Joe, has enhanced risk in that area of storms in Texas, and slight risk extends into Oklahoma. Marginal risk even further northeastward to the Arkansas state line. Otherwise, much of the nation is really not seeing a whole lot in the way of thunderstorms. And over the next couple of days, we actually see no severe weather being forecast tomorrow, just a narrow area of general thunderstorms from Michigan southwestward into the lower Mississippi Valley and back into Texas, also a small area in northern Minnesota and northwestern Michigan on the Upper Peninsula. And as we move on to day three being Friday into Saturday, they've got this little finger of thunderstorms poking from the Gulf of Mexico, the coastal bend of Texas, southeast Louisiana, northeastward into eastern Tennessee and southeastern Kentucky, just general thunderstorm activity. And also, I just noticed this, they actually have a small area of general thunderstorms that's outlined, Joe, right in Lake Michigan. I don't think I've ever seen them do that. Just over the lake, not on the land on either side.
I didn't notice that. I looked at these the convective outlook maps. I did not even notice that. And it shows the outline and the arrow indicating to the right of the line whether that's weird.
That's very strange. That really is. I'm just for laughs. I want to see if they mention this. Convection with sporadic lightning flashes will also be possible over Lake Michigan as cold mid-level temperatures overspread the region. Well, they got the big upper low that's going to form. I guess that's what they're looking at. But that is a strange outline that they have. And on day 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, They have you don't see this too often, where each of those days in the long range potential is too low. So that's interesting enough. And here's the rainfall forecast. So for you folks in northern New York, in north central New York and northeastern New York, we're talking inch and a half to 3 inch plus amounts. Also in Vermont, particularly in northwestern Vermont, WPC has a stripe there of 2.5 to 3 inches, and this is all going to be coming from this weather system over the weekend. And in the great state of also in New Hampshire, we're seeing inch and a half to 2.5 inch amounts, and in Maine, particularly in the eastern part of Maine, where you've got that stripe of 2.5 to 3.5 inches that comes in from off the ocean. So that's kind of where, that's where the track of that, what it'll probably either be just a non-tropical deep low or a post-tropical from Philippe. Again, either way, it's a 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. And elsewhere, you've got some heavy rains in the Pacific Northwest and some heavier rains indicated for parts of the coastal bend of Texas. Southeast, again, dry, especially for me. I haven't had rain in 15 days now in a row with not a drop of rain. Nothing.
Well,
this is the dry season here in North Georgia.
I've had exactly the opposite, as you are well aware, up in this neck of the woods. So,
well, you've been living in a bog this year.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. 72 likes. Thank you, those of you who hit the like button as we move into our second half hour here on the Joe. Well, almost our second half hour here on the Joe and Joe Weather Show. So plenty of time to get us over 100, if you please. So here's the situation with what's going on over the weekend. I think it's probably fair if we look at the upper air and take a look at what's happening. So you've got this ridge off the East Coast now. You can see the deep trough that is dropping into the northern plains, all that lovely blue from south central Canada extending down into New Mexico. You have this, there's actually an upper low, as we pointed out, sitting in just north of the northern Bahamas. The upper high is sort of enveloped around it, so it's kind of offshore there. So we've got some time here, but that ridge is going to be weakening and moving east. The upper low is going to move northeast. Here comes the deep trough diving into the western lakes. So what's offshore, if you kind of look carefully, there's two little dots here to make note of. So this is the upper low that started out in the northern Bahamas. This little teeny tiny dot that you see to the east of that and north of Bermuda is the model's representation of the upper feature of Philippe. Now, what the GFS says is that the upper low to the west and the deep trough to the west of that are going to just basically absorb Philippe. You're going to have a non-tropical low that forms under that upper low, sort of becomes the main energy here. And as this deep trough drops into the lakes with that cutoff low that moves into New York State, that energy goes up into eastern New England. If you look at the European, the difference between the models is that the European and some of the other models make the tropical system. You wind up with the same result. It's just that it makes the tropical system the main system and holds on to it. Now, of course, the Hurricane Center makes it post-tropical by the time it gets up into eastern New England. But again, the outcome is the same. You're going to have a deep low that's going to move, deepening low that's going to move northward past southeast of Cape Cod and then turn northwest and go into Maine and get absorbed by this gigantic upper low. And then as far as the pattern is concerned, this strong upper low, as instead of getting kicked out, is blocked because there's a big upper low that's sitting out in the Azores that's not moving. So it just rotates all next week. And that's going to keep us in a very chilly flow of air, I would say probably at least, through Thursday. And maybe even a little beyond that, because then here comes the next trough. And this one is for next weekend. The models keep one form or another, Joe, trying to show something along the East Coast for next weekend. The 12Z GFS went kind of nuts with this, and the European to a lesser extent, but here's the 12Z GFS with this wrapped up cutoff low in Illinois that swings across West Virginia and into the east next weekend, and makes a fairly interesting looking coastal storm out of this. But we're still a long ways away in terms of the basic details. But the one thing that crossed my mind is this upper air pattern that we have evolving for next week and beyond. This would have been great, for snow lovers. This would have been great to see, and this is the kind of pattern that made me think of the pattern we had with the 4 nor'easters back in 2018. The sort of dynamic pattern where you're getting these systems that are developing along the coast. We got the one for this weekend, which is playing out in a different way, but then you got this one, and who knows what's behind it. Just this very blocky look to things all over the place.
Well, when I think of that period of the 4 nor'easters, I think about the total time. I think it was I was out of power like 6 days. For each nor'easter, we were out without electricity for anywhere from 1 to 3 days, depending upon which storm you were making a reference to. And the thing I remember about that, Joe, that really stands out in my memory is the fact that you and I were working at FiOS 1 at the time, FiOS 1 News, and on one occasion they put us up at a hotel, and I remember going to the hotel, and half the parking lot was filled with trucks from electric companies from other parts of the state or other parts. In fact, they were all being put up there by their employer and said, "Okay, stay here, and tomorrow you're going to start going out and connecting people back up again with their power." It was that kind of a situation. So, yeah, we had snow, we had wind in many places, I think. But to me, I'll always remember, the fact that we had to deal without power, too, for a long time. Do not want to see that again.
No, I was furious with the last one because that's the one they kept us over there. I remember, and I was furious because that one was one where it was wound up puking snow over Long Island that night, where it was 4 to 5 inches an hour for like 4 hours, and a lot of places got 20 to 25 inches from the last one. And that became the latest that Long Island had ever seen a foot or more of snow out of one storm, because I think it was like March 25th that happened, and I had I couldn't see it, but I saw enough of those kind of storms over my years living out there. I guess if I missed one, it wasn't any big deal. But anyway, here's our surface map. For tomorrow and Friday, you can see this is. I'm using the 12Z. You can see the GFS. That low that you see well off the North Carolina coast is actually a non-tropical low. You can barely find Philippe at this point. It just gets absorbed. But the non-tropical low moves northward and intensifies, takes it right over Cape Cod, and gets down into the low 980s when it goes into Maine. And you see all the heavy rain that it produces. Now, there'll be some showery rains, I think, Friday night and Saturday as the low goes by and the cold front finally moves offshore. But the big rains are going to be up, upper Hudson Valley, north central, northeastern New York, Vermont, New Hampshire, into northern Massachusetts, and particularly into Maine with this. And then the low just, really strengthens. It's going to get windy. Once that front goes by, the gradient really tightens up with that deep low going up. So it's going to get pretty windy Saturday night and Sunday across the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic states. Now, I wonder if we might go to, there might maybe a little wind advisory criteria here when we get to Saturday night into Sunday.
It's possible. It's possible.
Yes, it is possible. And of course, with the vortex just sitting there in eastern Canada, a couple of things. Yes, that is snow that you see in the blue. That's on the Canada side of Lake Ontario and Lake Erie. So you have that. And it, just basically sits there in eastern Canada pretty much all week. And when it pulls out to the east, it sends another little arm of reinforcement. Now, here's the energy for next weekend on the GFS. And you can see it makes some sort of deep coastal low, with this deep upper low that it has in the Ohio Valley. It's got a coastal low that's way out, but then it sort of has another arm with a low back in Chesapeake Bay. I mean, it's hard to say how this is really going to play out ultimately, but this is the fact that the models can continue to focus, not just the GFS, but the European as well, and I think the Canadian may have done it. I didn't look at it, but let's take a look while we have it. You always get a high, yeah, even the Canadian in its long range has something going on for next weekend that looks, fairly sizable. So,
Canadian put 12Z on October 14th. Well, you just saw that. 12Z on October 14th, they have the storm like south of Long Island and massive rains all across eastern New York State.
yes,
Uh, so,
so this is not good. Okay, this is not good. But my point is the fact that all three models have this uh, out and have been showing this for many days now lends a high degree of confidence that next weekend is going to be a problem.
right. It also means that those of you who are astronomically inclined, that day, Joe, Saturday, the 14th of October, there's going to be an eclipse of the sun across all of North America. The western part of North America, it will be the kind of an eclipse where the moon is too small to cover the sun, so it looks like a ring of fire in the sky. That's the place to be if you want to really get an interesting view. Here in the Northeast or here in the New York area, we'll get about 1/3 of the sun apparently bitten off by the moon. It'll be an interesting sight if you could see it, but it doesn't look like we're going to be able to see it. But the fact that we have an eclipse on that day indicates that we will be having astronomically higher than normal tides. So that'll be fun to see whether or not we have to deal with not just heavy rain, but coastal flooding and beach erosion. And I'm sure all of you who have seen that innumerable times in recent days and weeks are just going to literally enjoy all of that. Not this weekend, but again next weekend, as we see or try to determine what exactly we're going to get out of this, whether it's one of those coastal storms or whether or not it's going to be one of those handoffs, a big storm going to the Great Lakes and a second storm developing. Still too early in the game, but you're right, Joe. The fact that all three models, the GFS, the Canadian, and the European, are all red flagging something atrocious to happen that weekend doesn't bode well if you have anything planned out of doors or anywhere that
No.
particular weekend.
And as far as the temperature anomalies are concerned, I'll go out and say Sunday and certainly Sunday, Monday, and probably next Tuesday, we're going to be struggling in a lot of areas just to get out of the 50s for daytime highs. I think that's a pretty fair assessment.
I would agree with you. In fact, I turned on the air conditioning today when it got to like 80, 84, 85. I said, I can't do it. I'm talking to you from my downstairs, from my basement, from my office. It's always so much cooler down here. It's lovely. But as soon as you go up the stairs, upstairs, and I said, look, we had the windows open. Yesterday was decent. The humidity was down low. I can't deal with this. So shut the windows. It might be the last time this season, but I said, I'm putting on the air conditioner. 4th day of October, and I'm putting on the air conditioning.
Yeah, I here. I mean, it got to I think 77 or 78 today, but because the nights have been so cool that the inside of my house is like 68, 69. So it doesn't stay warm enough long enough. And of course, the other thing is the sun angle now is really getting weak, and
Right.
very little sunshine reaches the ground because of the fact that the trees are all still covered with leaves, although the leaves are coming down and they are changing, but it does very little light makes it through to the bottom levels here in the mountains, so it
The
stays.
sun right now has the same declination, the same altitude at midday as the sun does in the very beginning of March, early March. And in another week or two, we're going to have a sun as low in the sky as we have in late February. That sun is dropping, Joe. It's going down, down, down. And I know it's unusually warm now, but as we've been promoting, come this weekend and especially next week, it's going to be anything but summertime around here.
Well, while we're waiting for those changes, we've got 90 likes, which is great. So got plenty of time to take us over 100 if you haven't hit the like button yet. If you like the show, hit the like button because we like it. And it's time to play Briller Jeopardy. Yes, it is. And Joe Rayo has Briller Jeopardy tonight.
And I've got it. I've got it. I want to apologize to Scott Briller because I've had this now for a week. But then again, due to circumstances beyond my basement's control, unfortunately, we're not able to do the show for about 5 days. But we can do it tonight, and I have the questions on hand. And Joe, tonight we have on this edition of Briller Jeopardy, we're going to deviate away from meteorology and science, and we're going to talk about Alfred Hitchcock movies.
Oh, I watched Shadow of a Doubt. That's my favorite.
Well,
which was on last night.
I'm going to give you quotes from some Alfred Hitchcock films, and you tell me what the movie is after I give you the quote. And I'm sure our audience. Let's see if our audience can join in with this as well.
Okay. I'm ready.
Here we go. Quote number 1. We all go a little mad sometimes.
We all go a little mad sometimes?
Yes.
Oh, God, we all go a little mad sometimes. God, I mean, it sounds like something Thelma Ritter might have said in Rear Window, but I'm thinking that's not it.
Point Pig says the birds. No. Sandy Blue Ocean says the birds. Everybody's saying the birds.
Yeah. I mean, it would fit Psycho, which Rich Rothmansky's putting up Psycho.
Right, and so it is.
It is Psycho? Okay.
It is Psycho.
Yeah, that's that was sort of the obvious one.
All right, here's number 2. Never climb a fence if you can sit on it.
Never climb a fence if you can sit on it.
Yes.
Climb a fence if you can sit on it. Oh, I have no idea, Joe. None.
Really?
I mean, I've seen just about every Hitchcock movie multiple times. That line doesn't stand out to me.
Brock Fakillo says squirrel.
Isn't it squirrel? Moose and squirrel. All right, everybody. All right, everybody, put the birds up there.
Everybody's saying the birds.
The birds. The birds. The birds.
Not the birds.
Say the quote again.
Leon got it. Leon Probitsky.
He says the lady vanishes.
The lady vanishes.
Okay. Oh.
That's
I've seen the lady vanishes. I don't remember that line.
All right. Well, how about this one? Number 3. I didn't break that window. What are you, a policeman?
I didn't break that window. What are you, a policeman? But I'm trying to visualize the movie where a window was broken. Gee, here again. Don't start with the birds again, folks. Okay. I don't think it was Rear Window. I don't remember that. Chuck Cardinal's got the birds again. David Carter says the birds.
Well, guess what?
It's the birds. It's the birds.
The birds. And you want to know something funny? When Scott sent me the questions and answers, he spelled the birds not B-I-R-D-S.
B-Y-R-D-S?
B-Y-R-D-S.
Okay.
So, all right, Joe. Well, here's one that you have to get. Number 4 on the list. You ready?
Yeah.
If you could find one perfect thing or place or person, you should stick to it.
If you should find
one perfect thing
or place or person, you should stick to it. Again, that sounds like something Thelma Ritter would say in Rear Window, but I don't think she said it there. So that can't be it. There is a vague familiarity to that line. I just don't know.
Okay, well,
Rayo Stamps says the man who knew too much.
Rayo Stamps is back.
Yes, with the wrong answer, I assume.
Yes,
okay.
No, not the birds.
Psycho, Tape, no. Rear Window. Vertigo. I don't think
No.
so. No. Uh,
How about if I say this of Sunnybrook Farms,
Rebecca.
Rebecca. Rebecca.
Rebecca. That was the only time Alfred Hitchcock walked away with an Oscar was for Rebecca, which won for Best Picture, and he was a producer. So he was one of the producers, if I remember correctly. So that's the only time he was nominated for director Oscars multiple times, but he never won as a director, which is just really bizarre. It's just really bizarre that he didn't. But that's just the way the game is
I'm
played in
very
Hollywood.
I'm very upset that I don't stay up anymore late. I used to stay up late, and on MeTV at 12:35 they'd show Twilight Zone, and then at 1:05 they'd show an hour of
Alfred
Alfred.
Hitchcock presents.
And the other week, I'm so mad that I missed out. My very favorite Alfred Hitchcock presents was Lambs to the
Lambs
Slaughter.
of the Slaughter, yeah,
I love
with
that.
Barbara Bel Geddes, yeah.
Right, right,
That's a very actually Alfred Hitchcock only directed like a couple of those episodes. Um, he had a number of young directors under his tutelage, and they did actually directed those episodes. So it was a training ground for young directors.
right.
Uh, which is why and Hitchcock gave his name, and of course he did those wonderful opens and closes, which were just hilarious.
And of course, he would use that as the opening or the trailing give to the commercial.
Right,
And now here's one of those obnoxious commercials.
right. He always would have some disparaging, passive-aggressive line about commercials.
Well, here's the final question of the night. The
Okay,
final quote. Are you ready?
I go on. I haven't gotten any of them yet.
Intelligence.
Then
Nothing has caused human race.
race more than intelligence.
Right.
Finally, I get to get the end. That was Thelma Ritter. Thelma Ritter in Rear Window. You know the stock market crash? I predicted that.
Yeah.
Okay. And Jimmy Stewart says, uh, you know, the stock market crash was an economic event. It crashed, didn't it? I was nursing a director from General Motors. Kidneys, they said. Nerves, I said. And then I asked myself, what has General Motors got to be nervous about? Overproduction. And when General Motors has to go to the bathroom 10 times a day, the whole country's about to let go. I thought that was one of the best lines. That line, that whole sequence, and only Thelma Ritter could deliver that. Could do that. She was such a brilliant character actress, and very few people don't know this, Joe. But she is among a handful of people that uh, that were nominated multiple times for Oscars and never won. She received 6 supporting actress nominations in the course of the year of her career, and she never won. Deborah Kerr was another one whose birthday just passed, and I think it was one of the classiest, if not a great actress, but just just a classy woman. British actresses are just, they've got style, they've got class, and in the movies that they did. And she's another one who got nominated, I think, also 6 times without ever winning an Oscar.
I can empathize as one who has been
Well,
nominated
you're the
innumerable times for an
right. You're
Emmy.
the Susan Lucci of the of the broadcast meteorology world.
Exactly.
Hey,
And I
but
always
at least
tell,
you got nominated.
I always tell myself it's hard enough to get the nomination.
It
So
is.
it is. It is.
Yeah, and you don't know, people don't realize this, but with these awards that they have with these local, the local newscast Emmy awards, they're sent out to other markets. So you're at the mercy when they get to those other markets. So another market is judging your work, and they may not have any clue as to what's relevant in New York versus what's relevant in say Los Angeles. And I point to the example of the Suffolk County wildfires,
Right.
right? Which was a big deal on Long Island. It was a big deal. I mean, we had wall-to-wall coverage. I was part of it for the
So was
better.
I.
Right, we were part of it for the better part of
1995.
yeah, for the better part of a week or more. You know who judged the Emmys that year? Los Angeles.
Right.
Okay, they looked at that and they said, I mean, that looks like a garbage can on fire. I mean,
Right.
in terms of the news magnitude of it. So it's that, it's politics, it's all sorts of BS. And anyway,
And I was the one year that everybody said to me, including a couple of the people who were going up against me, you've won. You've got it. I mean,
right,
and that night, I tell you, Joe, I'm not exaggerating. At least 60% of the winners came from Telemundo or Univision, and we later found out that the judging was done in southern Florida, Dade
right.
County.
So there's that.
So that
So
so it was that's the way it goes sometimes.
yeah, that's exactly.
One of the I forget who it was. It was some comedian who was one of the presenters or whatever. Halfway through the show, he steps up to the microphone. He says, "Maybe we would have called this the Spanish."
Well, they're all,
Whatever.
as there was a time where the cable outlets weren't allowed to even compete in the Emmys. So they had their own Cable Ace Awards, which
Right.
I have one or two of those somewhere around here.
Yeah.
So you weren't even allowed to compete. So I don't know when it was that they finally made the switch where they allowed, News 12 was able to compete openly. Um, well, they started competing in the late 80s, and then they added all the other upstate New York stations to it, and then the Jerseys and the stations and all the cable outlets and everything else. So just,
Right.
you know what? You had a wonderful career, Joe. You still have a wonderful
Thank you.
career.
I thank you. The Christianopedia, I agree with. One day we should have, and Scott, are you listening? We should have a Little House on the Prairie trivia for the chat board. And I got it. And I'm not ashamed to tell you this, Joe. Not once, but twice, because I was a big fan of that show, Little House on the Prairie. I cried my eyes out. And every time I see every time they run it on cable or whatever, the one of the episodes was when Jack died. Remember the dog that they had that
Yeah,
the
I mean, I did watch the show from time to time, but it wasn't on my must-watch list.
I cried my eyes out when Jack died, and also when Willie was Nellie was the enemy of the Ingram girls. He was
Oh,
always like
right, right.
stuck up, and her little brother was Willie. And all through the course of the show, as the series ran for like 10 seasons, we were able to watch as these characters grew up. And eventually, Half Pint, which was Laura Ingram, became the local school teacher, the school marm, and then she had to leave. She got married to Almanzo, and it was her last day of teaching. And Willie, they had one schoolhouse, and so you had to teach the kids in various grades in the same room or whatever. So here's Willie now, and he was always like the character in the show, always causing trouble or whatever. And so on the last day, when Laura's getting ready to leave the school as the teacher, Willie goes up there and says, "Miss Ingram," he said, "one more time for old time's sake," or whatever. And Laura or Half Pine would always tell Willie, says, "Willie, go to the corner." And it was the last time. Willie's now much bigger or whatever like that, even bigger than she is. And she said, "Willie, go to the corner." And he went to the corner and just like stood in the corner. And while she left the room or whatever, but it was you had to be there. I'm sure
Yeah.
Kristen knows what I'm talking about. If you're a fan of the show, and it was such a sad, dramatic kind of thing. So that was a great show. I enjoyed it. I thoroughly enjoyed it in the run of. And the guy from Pathmark, Joe, was the guy who put an end to the show. Remember there was this guy with glasses,
Yeah, I remember the Pathmark guy.
the Pathmark man or whatever.
Right.
On the very last episode of Little House on the Prairie, he came in and played like a corrupt robber baron, and he was gonna take over the town, and everybody had to answer to him. It was a totally different type of character than what we grew up with watching him as the ShopRite man or the Pathmark man. What and eventually what they did was, in order to keep the Walnut Grove, the little town or community, out of his hands, they blew up every single building. Each one they blew up the buildings, and then they marched out of what was left of the town. Onward,
Oh,
Christians.
God. Rayo Stamp says, I will never forget the incompetence of Mrs. Beadle letting the school children out in a raging
In the
blizzard.
blizzard.
Well,
In the
they had
blizzard.
they had an early dismissal. You know, if they had early dismissal in those days, then they would have gotten out. Bogle Melikar. I'm sorry. I'm trying to visualize you, and I'm having a tough time here. And I know you can't
They
put a.
did, and you were right, Joe. You were right. In that episode, it was Christmas Eve, and Miss Beadle let the kids out early, unknowingly that there was an approaching bad blizzard, which
Well,
literally
she clearly
overswept.
doesn't. She clearly didn't watch the wall-to-wall television coverage that they had.
Exactly.
You know, right? I mean, News 12 was around in those days, but it was smaller. It was called News 1/2. Bogle Melikar, it was working for News 12. He says when we had the Suffolk wildfires. I'm not. I don't know if that's your actual name. Okay, I'm thinking that it's not. Maybe you're using a handle of some sort. Uh, but I'm trying to visualize who you are, and I can't. So I apologize. I try to remember everybody, but it's been so long ago. Anyway, 118 likes. We've just crossed the 8:30 Eastern time mark, and Barry Romansky, I kind of remember. Ogle, I remember that name. I remember that name. It was a long time ago. Oh God, I'm sorry. All right. Thank you. Though. I'm sorry.
We're back tomorrow.
We're back tomorrow. Thank you for the 100 and just about 120 likes. The Joe and Joe Weather Show brought to you by Tempest by WeatherFlow. Get the revolutionary Tempest weather system. Join the fastest growing observing weather network on the planet. The link is pinned to the top of the chat board. It's also on the description of this video. Use the coupon code I Want a Weather Station for whatever you purchase. And remember, Christmas is coming, so this would make a great gift for kids, so you know. And if you do use the coupon, if you do buy anything there, use the coupon code I Want a Weather Station, and if you do, you will get
10% off.
Omni True Value Hardware at 1226 North Wellwood Avenue in West Babylon, New York. 631-756-1125 is the telephone number, and the website is
OmniTrueValue.com. And we're going to close the show tonight. I just want to show everybody
your tattoo.
I had Renata and I got our shots today.
Oh, okay.
Top one was COVID-19. Middle one is the flu shot.
And then what? Shingles.
And the bottom one was RSV.
RSV.
Yeah. So we're all set and ready for whatever is going to be.
Well, good for you. Excellent. All right, folks. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Bye.